The following podcast is offered freely through the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and by Jonathan Foust. To learn more or to make a donation to support this work, please go to www.jonathanfoust.com.
Well, I'm so pleased we've got a thunderstorm. Maybe I'll get some good drama for my most emphatic points. Let's see how the timing works. I'd like to read one of my favorite poems by William Stafford. It's called The Way It Is. There is a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. So I've always wondered, what exactly is that thread? And to me, it has something to do around the inner knowing that each of us has, whatever we might call that. I wanted to share a story of a young guy in his 40s who'd been single his whole life, but then it occurred maybe marriage would be a good thing. And then suddenly there was kind of a rush of sort of pressure, for marriage. He sort of ventured into it. He met a very wonderful person, and with all this mounting social pressure to move toward a commitment toward marriage, something didn't feel right for him. And yet the pressure sort of overrode his own sense of what felt right. And he threw himself to make the marriage work, but years later that felt sense was kind of verified, and he kind of had to work his way through that. Chances are you might relate to that, moving into a relationship that somehow didn't feel quite right, and yet overriding it. I can relate to that story because it's mine. Living in an ashram, I had an arranged marriage, and with someone, a very wonderful person who I truly adore. But I had a distinct feeling that it just wasn't the right thing for me. And years later, having to kind of work through that. So I'd like to talk about intuition, the sense of inner knowing. Like, how do we cultivate that sense of inner knowing? It's, to me, kind of a byproduct of meditation. And one of the translations of the word vipassana is clear seeing. We're practicing what it means to see clearly, to make the distinction between the stories, our preferences, our embellishments, and to come in contact with what's true, what's actually true. So I'd like to talk about the nature of your mind when it's caught in fear, and the nature of the mind when it's open. I'll talk a little bit too about what I think is the most reliable form of intuition that you can cultivate. And we'll explore a decision-making process for you to try on. And a little bit about what do you do when your intuition is not functioning, when you're closed off from that sense of inner knowing. So the intuition I'm talking about is not really the psychic stuff, but I do have a story about that. A frog telephones the psychic hotline. His personal psychic advisor tells him this: you are going to meet a beautiful young girl who will want to know everything about you. The frog is thrilled. Well, this is great. Am I going to meet her at a party? Well, no, his advisor says, in her biology class. Sorry. So not that kind of psychic hotline stuff. And getting to your own inner knowing, your own inner authority. But I did want to tell the story of a young man I spent some time with who was stewing over a real issue in his life. He was torn between quitting his job, which he kind of liked, and starting a new career, which was kind of appealing to him, starting off on his own. He had some ideas about how he might make some money, creating an app. And he also had a new family and a new relationship. And his partner was mostly okay, but kind of nervous about the possibility of him letting go of some steady income, with pretty high overhead. And as he was sharing with me, he just couldn't stop his mind from going over the same stuff over and over and over again. And you know that hamster wheel thing on the mind, when you're spinning through the same problems but no resolution, no shift whatsoever? So he kind of laid it out for me. And I love that line that says, do not seek for love, but seek to find the barriers to love and address those. And so I asked him, well, what are you afraid of? And he kind of outlined it for me. He was afraid of failure, of not being able to keep up the payments on the condo that he had just bought. He was afraid of being out of control with everything going on in his life. He named that he had some really successful friends from school who were having a lot of success, and he had sort of a fear of kind of the shame of not being as successful as they were. He felt that pressure. And he didn't want to let his partner down. And so it was really helpful to examine those fears as a part of beginning to sort of deconstruct the issue that he was dealing with. One of the biggest stumbling blocks to contacting inner knowing or clear seeing is fear. We have 4 big fears. One is the fear of failure. One is the fear of loss. One is the fear of shame. And one is the fear of pain. And we spend a lot of our life avoiding those. Now, the opposite of those, what also drives us, where the kind of clinging mind comes, is the desire for success, the desire for high status, the desire for pleasure, and the desire for praise. So perhaps you can sense that quality of paralysis that comes in around important decisions you have to make. The clear seeing is gone. There's just sort of this maelstrom of obsessive thinking, of fantasy, of anxiety, of depression, of criticism, or doubt. So doubt and that ruthless critic is one of the most important blocks to address. There's that voice in the back saying, you can't do that. That's nuts. Play it safe. Or who do you think you are? And we have to sort out those voices. Steve Jobs said, your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by a dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of other opinions drown out your own inner voice, and have the courage to follow your own heart and your own intuition. And I think for many of us, we are so caught in the voices and the opinions of others that we can't make contact with our own true calling, our own true dharma, if you will, our own sense of purpose. There's a phrase which you may be familiar with, that enlightenment is an accident and meditation makes you accident prone. In that same way, intuition is something you can't make happen. You can't make that inner knowing happen. All you can do is create an optimal environment for that knowing or that intuition to arise. And the question becomes, how do we then create that optimal space for that sense of clear seeing? I just led a 5-day intensive up in New England called The Still Small Voice Within, which is sort of this relationship between meditation practice and intuition. And there's a really wonderful study of kind of how we process information and how information goes through our mind. And very, very briefly, some of us tend to process visually. We think in pictures. Some of us are more auditory. We sort of hear words. And some of us are more kinesthetic. We're tuned into sort of the felt sense of things. There's a fourth quality of intuition that some call direct cognition. You just have a knowing. It didn't come through any particular channel. There's a whole wonderful study of these 3 different styles of learning. You can begin to kind of identify your own and find how other people process information as well. People are visual, tend to talk really, really fast. They use their hands a lot. They have an idea what it's supposed to look like, and they just want to get it across as quickly as they can. And they use words like, oh, picture this. Oh, can you imagine this? They're literally thinking in pictures. So that's how they tend to process information. Other people are more auditory. So if you listen to their language, they'll use words like, wow, that sounds really good. Or, that doesn't ring a bell. Because they're processing that way. So I always like to think of William Blake as the classic visual intuitive. He had these visions, and all of his art and poetry was to simply recreate what he saw. And then Joan of Arc would be the classic auditory intuitive. The third, the kinesthetic, is a very, very interesting place. People who are more kinesthetic in their intuition, if you listen to how they talk, it's a little bit slower, because they're waiting for the feelings to make sense. So if you have a great massage therapist and they put their hands on that spot, and you say, how did you know that's the spot? And they'll say, I don't know, it just felt right. So one of the interesting things is that by paying attention, we can develop each of these, but the kinesthetic is generally considered to be the most reliable form of intuition. It's also very tied into the 4 foundations of Buddhist philosophy, which is tuning into the energy and the felt sense, the feeling tone of how your body is holding a life experience, an emotion, a thought, a question, learning how to pay attention to that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this felt sense. Maybe you've heard how when there's an earthquake, the animals tend to react with great intelligence. So the first time this was noted, just in case you were interested, was 373 BC in Greece. Rats, weasels, snakes, and centipedes reportedly left their homes and headed for safety several days before a huge earthquake. And there's also evidence that birds and reptiles and insects all took off. And do you remember the little earthquake we had here in DC? not that long ago. Yeah, there's an interesting. I found the website where they're describing what the animals did beforehand, and they were all very tuned in, all reacting in their own ways. Like the beavers went out to the middle of the water and waited until it was over and came back. So there's something about that tuning into the wisdom of our bodies that can be quite powerful when we're exploring the sense of intuition or clear seeing, making a distinction from what you're thinking about something to actually how it feels on the inside. Just a little Zen pop quiz inquiry. If you can imagine at the end of this talk, and you go out to your car. In fact, you can just close your eyes for a moment. This will be real quick. You're walking out to the parking lot, and there you see in the car next to yours, getting into their car, is your best friend from high school. As you think about that, can you notice anything in the felt sense? What does that feel like inside? And you might even, if you like, bring your hand to that place where you feel it, if you feel anything. So you can open your eyes for a moment. So a number of people kind of brought their hand to their heart. There's simply thinking of your best friend from high school elicits a feeling, a felt sense. Your body holds that thought in a particular way. So we'll try one more. Again, you can close your eyes. You're on an elevator and you're going up about 6 flights, and about 3 stories up, the doors open, and someone mildly creepy gets on the elevator. And then the doors close. What does that feel like inside? Just notice that. So we won't linger here too long. But when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So did you notice a little something? A little tightening or a little hardening inside? Yeah. Many people report before some big event, they have butterflies in their stomach, or kind of like a gut-wrenching feeling, kind of feeling sick. And there's all kinds of research being done now on what's called the second brain, or the enteric nervous system. There are sheaths of 500 million neurons that are embedded in the lining of the gastrointestinal system, from the esophagus right down to the gut. And this is a very powerful thing to tune into. And not just as a little intuitive technique, but so much of our training in meditation is learning how to make this distinction from the cognitive to the direct experience of here and now. You come back to the experience of here and now. Energy is simply present, and it begins to form into 3 qualities of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, called Vedana. And from there it goes into a thought. And if we don't notice the thought hardens into a belief. The belief becomes a habit. The habit becomes your character. And the character becomes your destiny. So in this training, we're training again and again to sort of notice the belief, the thought, but come back to the here and now. Rest there. It's a very, very powerful practice, lots of science behind it. But also what begins to emerge is you begin to see the habitual thoughts. You begin to see the patterns of what you think. You begin to see the beliefs and look at the integrity or the truth of those beliefs. But you also get to sense who you are as the awareness of your thoughts, and who you are as the awareness of your body and how it holds a particular belief or thought. And you begin to sense who you are as awareness, as non-judging awareness. When you are less caught and driven by your thoughts and beliefs, when you believe them just a little bit less, a lot more space begins to open up. We begin to open up to what Deepak Chopra calls that field of infinite possibility, where anything and everything can arise. So this requires a different kind of a listening. It's actually more of a sensing. It's including your whole body when you're sensing the moment. So back to this fellow I was doing some work with. He was torn about this issue of, do I quit my job? Do I start off on my own? The thing that I've always found quite interesting, particularly when it comes to making important decisions in your life, is that if there's any conflict, it's very helpful to kind of break it down into identify that there's something that wants the change and something that doesn't. On a very, very simplistic level, something wants it, something doesn't. Or there are multiple things that want it and multiple things that don't. And depending on which one of those things has the microphone, that's what you believe in any given moment. As someone said quite wisely, we're run by committee. It's all a question of who has the mic, and we tend to believe that. The other thing that I've found, particularly when we begin to explore decision-making and tuning into that sense of inner knowing, is that there's generally some kind of an unmet need. There's something you might be wanting, but you're needing something that might help you to sort of complete that. So, a little bit about that. Part of him really wanted to start off on his own, but he was afraid of failure. So we explored that fear. And we contacted it in the felt sense. He could feel sort of the smallness, the kind of the sort of trembling. You know, was really terrified of being a failure. And so we began to address holding that with some compassion, holding that with some empathy. And so he explored that, just to be gentle with that fear. And only as he was able to see it with some compassion and some empathy, he could feel it kind of loosening a little bit. And of course, every quality of fear has some quality of an unmet need. Something that you're needing, something you're hoping for, something you're wanting that's not happening. And as he sat with that, what he realized was that what he was needing was some support. He was needing some wise counsel. You know, he was needing some mentoring. And he thought, well, if I had that, well, then maybe I could go a little further down the road rather than just being paralyzed. And that was the key for helping him make a shift in relationship to this important decision in his life. Now, it wasn't that he went off and said, that's what I'm going to do, and that's what he did. Actually, what he did was he found some wise counsel. You know, he found some mentors. He talked to some people who were already doing what he wanted to do, and he interviewed them. And he came to the realization that he wasn't ready yet. He wasn't ready to make that move. But what it did is it opened up a whole realization of where he was, a sense of patience for himself. It opened up the whole dialogue with his partner, who was very understanding and supportive. And he realized that the decision for him was to stay where he was, but to take small steps where he could educate himself. So when the time was right, that he could make this shift in a way that felt more organic to him. I think quite easily we have a tendency to sort of boil down our decisions and kind of make them either black or white. But we can really break it down and sense that if there's something you're wanting and it's not happening, it's very, very helpful to really sense, where is that tightness? What is the fear there? Can I be gentle with it? And what does it need? And if it had that, what would that be like? So I'd like to guide you into a little meditation if you'd like to try this on. And here's how it's somewhat simple, but it's really effective. I found it to be really effective. I'd like to recommend that you not choose that lifelong, soul-crushing, gnarly issue you've been wrestling with your whole life, but maybe like scale it back, and just to try out the technology and see how it works. You could even do like, what am I going to have for breakfast tomorrow morning? That's safe. So what you'll do is you'll decide some decision you need to make, and it's helpful if you can break it down to 2 or 3 options, just 2 or 3 options. Make them very clear. And then you'll choose one of those options. I'll guide you through this. And it's like you're telling your body, this is what I'm going to do. And then you pay attention to that felt sense. Pay attention to the enteric nervous system. And primarily it'll be through the midline, the jaw, the throat, the heart, the lungs, the belly. That felt sense of how your body holds it will either be very strong and unmistakable. It'll be a wave or flicker or blip. Most likely it'll feel kind of vague and unformed, but see if you can hang out with that. And I'll just ask you a few questions as a way to sort of be with it. And chances are that some of the questions may not resonate for you, so feel free to ignore me. So when you're ready, you can close your eyes. This will be just for a few minutes. So you might bring into mind some decision you need to make, something that's kind of been weighing on your mind. Now, if you need a little more time as you kind of go through the files, just raise your hand. Okay, we'll take a few more moments. And then again, if you need a little more time, you can raise your hand. So to bring this decision into kind of sharper focus, you might find it helpful to visualize it. If you're a visual person, find some visual representation, either as like a still image or a moving image. A little trick is to turn up the color or the contrast of the image. Makes it a little more vibrant. You might include any auditory memory or information you have about this, any sounds or words or tone of voice. And then turn your attention to the felt sense. How does your body hold this decision as it is right now? What's it like inside when you contemplate? Now, if you can just clarify for yourself, if you can break the options down into 2, maybe 3 options, what are the 2 or 3 options you have available for yourself? We'll just take a little bit of time to clarify that. And now, if you're ready, if you can choose one of those options, it's as if you're telling your body, this is what we're going to do. Imagine yourself doing it, and notice anything that might arise inside in this felt sense. What does it feel like when you imagine following this path? Can you sense any anxiety, tightness, or fear inside? And can you offer this, if it's there, some form of empathy or kindness or compassion? And how does it shift as you do so? Is there a sense of what you need that would support you in moving forward? Is there an unmet need, something you're hoping, wanting, needing, that would most fully support you regarding this decision? And one final question. Regarding this decision in front of you, what advice do you have to give yourself? And if you were to follow that advice, what would that feel like? What would that be like? And notice anything that may have shifted in relationship with this particular issue. Just saying hello to that. And then when you're ready, you can let your eyes open or remain with them closed if you prefer. So I hope that was helpful in some degree. I hope I didn't unleash any undue psychic torment through that inquiry. You may not have felt it tied up in a neat little bow, but there's something about looking a little bit deeper that can be very helpful. You know, familiarity leads to wisdom, as the Buddha said. So, with just a little bit of time left, so I'm going to start talking faster because I have a lot more to get through. What do you do when your intuition isn't working? Just a little bit on this. When you are caught in problems in life, inevitably there's some fear, inevitably there's some contraction, inevitably there's some tightening. And that is exactly how to close off your intuition. You get locked in the mind, you're locked in the cognitive, and you're on the hamster wheel. So one of the keys is to pause, that sacred pause. The first John Rockefeller, when he had an important decision to make, he would go to his country club, play a round of golf, go back to his room, take a nap, and then make his decision. That was sort of his ritual. And it makes total sense. He changed his state of consciousness to make that decision. Einstein quite famously said that no problem was ever solved in the same consciousness that created it. So to get out of any rut, to shift any problematic situation, you have to shift your consciousness. So if you don't belong to a country club and you don't have a private room, there are other options. That's where meditation comes in. It's about focusing less on your issue and focusing more on shifting your state. If you've ever done an intensive period of meditation, like on a retreat, it's very, very interesting because after a while, you stop believing every thought. You start to see the thoughts just as a stream. And from there, you begin to see how many of those thoughts are limiting. You begin to look into your beliefs. Things begin to open up inside through this practice, particularly in intensive practice. And one of the interesting things I've noticed is that whenever I would have any insight about my life, immediately preceding that insight was a state of deep relaxation with no expectations whatsoever. So that quality of opening is so important. How do we deeply relax, let go of expectations, and just open to the here and now? We're always trying to control our experience. There's a wonderful phrase that says, relax, absolutely nothing is under control. So in this training that I do, I like to share these tips if you want to start your own 900 psychic line tonight when you go home. That whenever there's any form of intuitive inquiry, there are some particular stages you go through. The first one is you learn how to open. You practice letting go of expectations, releasing attachment to the results. That's key. The second is inquiry, and that is the potency of the question you ask yourself. What is the question? Now there's pragmatic inquiry or solution inquiry. You know, what should I have for breakfast? And of course, there's spiritual inquiry, which is an amazing topic of actually deeply, sincerely asking the questions that are designed to take you into truth. What am I? You know, what's my purpose in life? That opening and that question. But solution inquiry is a great way to practice this technique. So once you open and you inquire, well, then you notice what arises. And then you report it out. And then you evaluate. And for most of us, because that ruthless critic is so intense, we ask that question, we open, something comes up, and the mind goes, oh, that's ridiculous. That's why I know whenever I'm working with someone one-on-one and they say, oh, this is so stupid, I know we're right on it. That's, you know, the truth is coming through. So here are just a few things that can be helpful when you explore this very interesting balance of inquiry. The first one is to really get clear, what is your question? What is the question you have in mind? That's the most important thing. What do you want to know? And the second is the power of pausing. To realize that when you're caught in anxiety, there's some form of leaning forward, there's some form of control. And that inner knowing, that clear seeing, only comes when you relax. And again, the power of meditation is all about learning how to shift from that cognitive to the here and now. The third quality is to cultivate the sense of who you are as the observer, that quality of non-judging mind, that quality of non-grasping mind, the capacity to see what's happening right now without your preferences. The fourth quality is to learn to listen to your body, to learn to listen to that felt sense. There's a lot of potency there. It includes the mind, but the shift, again, from the cognitive to, wow, so can I listen to the whole body? What happens then? And the fifth is to learn to evaluate later. You know, just, you can go through the judging and comparing later, but the real inquiry is right in the here and now. So we'll do a real little Zen pop quiz inquiry practice just to kind of close tonight. If you'd like, you can close your eyes. This is a little pragmatic thing that I'll often do before I go to bed on a reflection for the next day. to kind of help me sort of tune in. So this first step is to open. So you might just take a moment and feel the breath. Again, open to the sounds around you. Kind of a felt sense of the body. And so here's the inquiry, the question. This is in regard to tomorrow. What are the three most important things about tomorrow? And now just notice what arises. Kind of report them out to yourself. And just let that fall away. And you might again feel the breath. Just sensing who you are as this being of energy, of sound vibrations. Internally sensing any tingling, pulse, vibration, internal movement of breath. Noticing this quality of mind, this comparing, judging mind that seeks to find understanding and how it serves you in your life. And you might sense this quality that's sometimes called the Buddhi mind. This is the quality of mind that is not colored by craving or aversion or confusion. A quality of presence, a quality that is seeking nothing. As you reflect on your Dharma, on your path, on what enlivens you, what brings you more alive, just sense this power of pausing, of suspending the inner critic, of opening to the whole body. There is a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. When you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen. People get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. When you're ready, you can deepen your breath. When you're ready, you can let your eyes open. I have a problem with the last line that says you don't ever let go of the thread. I think it more as a remembering that when you relax and when you pay attention, the thread appears. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope this was helpful. A few quick announcements. I'm leading a day-long retreat this Saturday. I don't know if you got that goofy little thing I sent out. Couldn't resist.